Reflections with Marilyn Baker. Brought to you by Torch Trust, the Christian organisation with a vision for people with sight loss.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Reflections from Torch Trust, the show that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm Marilyn Baker, and it's wonderful to have your company. This Sunday in the UK is Father's Day, a day when we pay tribute to dads for the roles they play in shaping our lives. Today, however, also brings with it hurt for some, and we'll be looking at the highs and lows of what today is about, with my guest, the singer-turned-broadcaster, Reverend Cindy Kent. And I started by asking Cindy about her role leading up to her new job as a vicar in London. Many of our listeners will have heard you on Premiere, I think. I know that's when I heard you, but you've sort of changed your focus a bit now, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, what I call my third phase of life, if you know what I mean. Way back in the 60s when I was a youngster, I met up with three guys and we got together and formed a group called The Settlers, and we went on for 11 years doing all sorts of radio and television and records. We recorded a song called The Lightning Tree, which was the theme tune to a TV series called Follyfoot, which made the charts, and we had a great time for 11 years. That was my first bit. Then I moved into my second part, which was moving into radio, which I love.
Yeah, radio
and I moved into... Oh, isn't it? It's great.
Yeah.
The pictures are brilliant. And I look so much better on radio than I do on television, that's for sure. And I moved into the BBC religious programmes and various things and commercial. And then when Premiere was thought of as an idea, I was the first presenter they signed up that time. And it was wonderful because we were breaking new ground. It was an exciting time. It was something I wanted to get on board with. And I did that for quite a few years. And then during that time there, Marilyn, what happened? I just felt God was saying, I think there's something else I want you to do. And it ended up being, I think I want you to get ordained in the Church of England, which is the church I go to. I still carried on with Premier a little bit, but then I got given a lovely church in Whetstone in North London. And it was an unpaid job, 2 days a week and Sundays, but you got a lovely vicarage to live in and lots of lovely people. And so I was there for a long time. And then I hit an age that has a 0 on the end of it, and I'll let you decide which particular one that might have been. And I thought, I think I should move into just taking it a bit easier. And I couldn't find anywhere to live in that part of London because it was all mega expensive. Anyway, cut a long story short, I moved out to a place called the Isle of Sheppey, which most people have never heard of, but is a beautiful island off the North Kent coast.
Yes, it is.
And I found... you've been there, have you?
Yes, I have, yeah.
And I had this bungalow with a sea at the bottom of the garden and a view across the water, and it was just lovely. And I thought I'd be there till they carried me out feet first, but my son had other ideas, and he rang me up one day and said, "You're going to be a grandma, and we want you to move back to North London to be near us." So I came back here nearly 3 years ago and round the corner from my lovely granddaughter, who I absolutely adore. And I got offered the chance to take up a church, and I did. And so for the last 6 months, I've been the vicar of St. Peter's Church in Arkley, which is just north of Barnet. And it's lovely. It's 5 minutes away from my granddaughter. It's got some lovely people. I'm doing my best to build up this congregation and whatever. But, there are obstacles to overcome with some people, aren't there, about coming to church? You've probably found this. They say they've got a faith, but why should I come to church? And then there's a lot of people who don't have a faith. So I'm trying to think of lots of things to put on in the church and in the church hall so that people can come to them. And there's this expression, isn't there, about people belonging before they believe. And that's what I'm trying to come up with ideas for. Something that we can do. Musical concerts. I'll tell you what happens. You'll be impressed with this, Marilyn. The London School of Church Music, is it? Or the Royal School of Church Music, hire our church hall and church 2 days a week 4 times a year to do music exams. And that's anything from piano to saxophone to double bass to harp we had last time. And it's all children. And they come and take their exams. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to put on a little concert with all the ones that had come through and maybe invite mum and dad and granny and granny. Another way of getting people inside the church. So that's what's taxing my minds and thoughts at the moment.
Great. Well, I'm glad you've taken on this church. I think it's a very new venture for you now. As I've said before, it's Father's Day. For some people, it's a time of real celebration, and for some, it's a time of sadness. Why do you think it's important to celebrate Father's Day?
I think it's important to celebrate Father's Day because we think of God as Father, and what more important thing can that be? I love the idea of God being my daddy. A daddy kind of cuddles a child, doesn't he? And a
Yes.
daddy wipes away the tears and pats you on the head and gives you a sweetie if you've done something nice. So, I mean, that's my idea of a dad. Sadly, I had a great relationship with my own father, but sadly he died when I was only 16. And that was, heartbreaking because we got on really well. I loved him. I can remember him holding my little hand in his big hand and, all those lovely memories. So, and to think of God as being somebody like that to me, I think he's so important. The rest of the Trinity is important as well, I must say quickly before I get accused of heresy or anything. But
exactly.
I mean, yes, the idea, of course, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, of course, but the God, But you know what is interesting, I think, Marilyn, is I think the idea of the Trinity is because some people will sort of fasten onto one particular facet of the Trinity, like I do with God. But some people might need God to be their brother or their sister or their friend.
Yes,
so they'll
I agree.
latch onto the Jesus side, and then so I think that's brilliant. God was so clever to come up with the idea of giving us three different images. I know it's only one image really, but it's like when you turn a statue round. You look at it from different angles, and that's, to me, what the Trinity is. And I tend to concentrate more on the God the Father side. So,
yes,
I think
I love the Father side. I love the Father side myself. People have been let down by fathers, and I sometimes wonder whether the expectations on parents is almost a bit much nowadays because we're all being told what to do, being good parents. Social media comes out with it. What would you say about that?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And, I'm glad I'm not a parent right now, although being a grandparent is very similar. But there is that expectation, isn't there? And there's this whole thing about people wanting things much more than when I was a child. And there is the pressure, isn't the peer pressure?
Yes.
I've got the latest whatever. Why haven't you? And maybe dad's out of work and your family can't afford to do it. And so dad feels very low because he can't actually do what his little child wants. And I think that is really sad that there is that peer pressure put on people today. And so, a lot of people might feel upset about, why aren't you a better dad? Because, my friend's dad did this, though, he's got a bigger car than you and all that, which is really sad because of those expectations. And some families just don't have the money for the toys or the holidays and all of that sort of thing. But I hope and pray that as churches, if we've got children in our churches, we are pointing them to God as a heavenly Father who's looking after them, who says, I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'm here for you. I just feel we must push that to children. We must let children know that they are loved with an everlasting love, which sadly some human fathers don't fulfill. There are a lot of fathers who leave. I mean, in my own case, and I've never told this on air before, my husband left us when my son was only 6 weeks old. I won't bore you with the details, but that was a tough thing for my son to cope with. Fortunately, he got to know him in later life, and so, that was all right. But he had no role model as a dad. But do you know what is fabulous is that he's now got his own 2.5-year-old gun, and he's a great dad. He seems to have picked it up, I think, probably from going to church every week. He's heard all about what a good dad does. And so, although he had no role model, he himself is a great dad. We don't know what we're passing on to children in some ways. And the church, I think, has a huge responsibility to be able to be both mother and father and sister and brother in certain cases where it's really, really needed.
I think you're right. I think actually to encounter God as Father is life-changing. It certainly has been for me. My own father was very strict. He was kind of abandoned as a child, and he couldn't trust people very well. When I found God as Father, he is amazingly almighty, but he's so tender as well, so tender, just like what you were saying. And I think we need to share God like that with people who have never encountered God as Father, that yes, he does want to give them a cuddle. What about people who have experienced a bad childhood and they're sort of looking for comfort? How does the church try to make those people feel more included and welcome?
$64,000 question, isn't it? Because people come to church bringing so much baggage with them so many suitcases full of hurt and expectation and loss. And as a priest, I mean, I find it very difficult sometimes to welcome a new person into the church because you don't know what they're bringing with them. So you tiptoe around in certain areas because you don't want to, talk in the wrong language that's going to put them off. And because we're all carrying our own baggage, aren't we? Whatever we're like. And it is very difficult, I think, sometimes when newcomers come into the church, you have to sort of be careful not to put them off by, rushing up to them and saying something that they're going to not enjoy listening to and not want to hear, and that's going to put them off going. So, we have to tiptoe around and be careful. But the one thing I think we just need to say to people is that you may have experienced an earthly father letting you down, not loving you, beating you, doing all sorts of things to you. But God has promised that he is different, that we are told that God's love and compassion for us is not like an earthly one. I was thinking then of the parable of the prodigal son, Marilyn, that lovely story where this kid goes off thinking he can do a lot better, and he went and then he comes back because it all goes wrong, and he knows he needs his dad, and his father saw him from a long way off, didn't he? I love that bit where he said,
I love that bit.
Saw him. Yeah, he saw him from a long way off and he was filled with compassion and he ran to his son. And I always think, isn't that a wonderful idea that I turn around to God sometimes and I say, oh, I'm sorry, or whatever it is. And he's running towards me faster than I'm running towards him. And isn't that one? And so he's doing that. He's doing that with all of us, which is absolutely fantastic. It illustrates that father-child relationship. So he does that with us. He loves us and he wants us to turn to him, and sometimes just turn to him and say nothing more than daddy, which as a child, maybe you did. I don't know. You can't think of words, but you just want to stand there. You just know you want that relationship with your dad. But as you say, it's not good in some cases because their only memories of their dad has been bad ones. How we do that as a church, I think, is to show that not everybody is the same, that the church will try and take the place of dad, but we'll try and help you remove those horrible thoughts from your mind and memories from your mind and receive that person as lovingly as we possibly can.
Yes, receiving them lovingly, I think, is very important. Receiving people as they are. They don't have to kind of fulfill something before they get to church. And there's always a new beginning with God, isn't there? Always new beginnings. I mean, how wonderful that is, that every day we can have that clean slate with him. I find that marvellous.
Yeah, and also in Matthew we're told, aren't we, that your heavenly Father knows what you need before you ask him.
Yes.
He already knows what we need. So if we go to him on a daily basis, and even if it's only saying, I'm really missing my earthly dad because he died last week, help me. God knows that. He knows you're missing your dad.
Yes.
He knows, and he will be there and he will hold you in his arms. It's a case of us turning to him, isn't it? Sometimes I think God is the last person we turn to. We turn to our friends, we turn to our vicars, we turn to our, whatever. And then, perhaps I'll ask God about this. And that's sometimes bottom of the list.
Yes, that's right. Exactly. So what's your favourite attribute of God as Father? You've almost answered it, haven't you? That tenderness, that approachability.
I think so. There's a lovely statue in Westminster Cathedral, the Roman Catholic Cathedral in London, which was very near Premier Radio Studios. And quite often I'd pop in there and just sit quietly. And there's lots of things in the main part of the Abbey, but there's a little side chapel at the front. And it's got a statue of Jesus, and he's standing there with one hand reaching out. It's not a great statue. I mean, it's a bit garish in some ways, but if you take that away. And I used to think sometimes as I was kneeling there that he was saying, just put your hand in mine. And it reminded me so much of when I was a little girl walking out on the street with my dad, who was a very big man, and his hand was enormous and my hand was very tiny. And I can still sometimes feel that big hand now around my little hand. And so that's, to me, that attribute that God has is like a father, holding me, my little hand in his big hand, leading me, taking me. And all I've got to do is follow him. All I've got to do is put my hand in his and he'll take me where I need to go. Now, there's lots of metaphors in that, aren't there? But that to me is the attribute of God, that he is bigger than me. He loves me and he just wants me to trust him. He wants me to hold on to him and he'll take me where he wants me to go. And as I say, that reminds me of my own dad. And so it's a lovely combination of memories in many ways.
Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Cindy, and we wish you well in this new venture as you take on the new church, and we're sure that's going to do well. Thank you very much indeed.
It's a pleasure. God bless you, Marilyn. Thank you for all you do.
Cindy referred to this already, but the story that helps me to understand the character of the Father the most is the story of the prodigal son. I love the fact that when the son got into a mess, the Father wasn't out to judge him. In fact, he wanted to reach out to him. He was longing for him to come back. The son had never been forgotten, you see, and the Father kept looking out for him. And he saw him coming from a long way off. And then all reserve left him, and he ran towards that son. And, of course, the son, feeling very deeply his own unworthiness, had rehearsed a speech, but the Father gathered him in his arms. All he wanted was to have his son home again. His heart was to forgive and to fully reinstate him as part of the family, even willing to trust him afresh with responsibilities too. Someone once said, the atmosphere in the kingdom of God is restoration, and I believe we'll all need that in some way or other as we go through our lives. My thanks once again to the Reverend Cindy Kent for spending time with us and thinking about the role of not just our earthly fathers, but finding love and hope in God the Father too. It's time now to turn to our thought for the week, which is read for us by James Brookman and is titled Knowing and Loving.
When I was still in short trousers, there was a song out which I liked. It was performed by the Teddy Bears. The first lines went like this: To know him is to love, love, love him. Just to see him smile makes my life worthwhile. A song by teenagers for teenagers. And the sentiment went something like this: Girl gets to know boy in such a way that she can't help falling in love with him, hook, line and sinker. Now her only desire in life is to bring him joy. Press the rewind button and go from the light pop culture of the 1950s to Westminster Abbey in the mid-1600s. Here, Parliament had commissioned a gathering of clergy and theologians to work on putting together a written confession of Christian faith. The aim was to consolidate the reforms that had swept through the Church of England over the previous century or so. It was done in a question and answer style. Listen to the first tenet. Question: What is the chief end of man? In other words, why are we here? Answer: The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Both the Teddy Bears and the devout Christian thinkers at Westminster Abbey made a similar connection between knowing someone, loving them, and desiring the other party's joy. What that question and answer states is simple yet profound, because it says why we are here. Unlike any other creatures, we are uniquely equipped to come to know God, which leads to our loving and adoring him. This in turn will show itself in our wanting to bring him pleasure. It's not one-way traffic either, for God himself knows us, loves us, and desires for us to enjoy a relationship with him. Going back to the Teddy Bears lyric, girl meets boy and gets to know him sounds natural enough. But how does a man or woman get to meet God and start to know him? This is where Christianity is unique, in that it directs us to Jesus. It is he who spoke and acted in such a way as to say, if you want to know what God is like, just look at what I do and listen to my words. In essence, Jesus was saying, know me and you know God. We meet Jesus, and through him God, when we hear about him or read about him. And God's own Spirit speaks to our hearts, pricks at our conscience, and challenges our mindset. If we will sincerely follow through with this introduction, then we may anticipate experiencing a two-way loving relationship with him, where each side desires to be the joy of the other.
Thank you there to James Brookman for reading our thought for the week on the theme of knowing and loving. That's all we have time for this week on Reflections from Torch Trust. I hope you've enjoyed our Father's Day conversation with the Reverend Cindy Kent and that it has impacted you in some way. There's plenty of things happening at Torch Trust over the next few weeks. We have our second Zoom coffee morning on the 27th of June. Why not join us? There's an introduction to becoming a sight-loss-friendly church on the 1st of July. And then our next holiday in High Lee is taking place between the 8th and 12th of July. That's all booked up now. But we'll also be at the Sight Village Central in Birmingham on the 8th and 9th of July. So do come and say hello to the team if you're visiting. To find out about any of these events with Torch Trust, or to leave us any comments or suggestions for the show, you can give us a call on 01858 438 260. That's 01858 438 260. Or email info@torchtrust.org. Until next week, from me, Marilyn Baker, God bless.
Reflections from Torch Trust.